Adrian Fernandez is arguably one of the most iconic IndyCar drivers from the 90s. From the liveries on his race cars to being a national hero in his home country of Mexico. He had a pretty successful career, racing 13 years at the top level of IndyCar racing, with his first 11 seasons being in the kart series from 1993 to 2003, where he would pick up 8 career wins, and his final 2 seasons in the Indy Racing League, where he would pick up 3 more victories. Unfortunately for Adrian though, his career was marred by tragedy, which includes moments that should have been some of his highest, most proudest moments of his career. And in today's video, we're gonna deep dive into the tragedies that outweighed the success of Adrian Fernandez's career. Adrian would drive his first 2 full-time seasons in the kart series for Gallus Racing, where he would finish a respectable 13th and 12th in the standings. But for the 1996 season, he would switch over to Tasman Motorsports. And at the 1996 Molson Indy Toronto, Adrian would drive the race of his life and put himself in position to get his first opportunity to stand on the top step of an IndyCar podium. In Toronto, Fernandez would roll off 3rd. At the start of the race, he would avoid Toronto's chaotic turn number 1 without any incident and slot in nicely in P3 behind his teammate Andre Ribeiro and Alex Zanardi. Fernandez would get credit for leading his first lap on lap 67, although it was during a green flag pit stop cycle. But when things cycled back around, Fernandez was in front of his closest rivals on the racetrack, Bobby Rahal and Alex Zanardi, only behind Greg Moore, who was leading the race at this point, but was not able to make it to the end and still needed to make his pit stop. And all 3 of these drivers were in position to leapfrog Greg Moore when that happened. Greg Moore would finally pit on lap 77, giving the lead to Adrian Fernandez, who has put some good distance between himself and Bobby Rahal and Alex Zanardi, as Greg Moore would come back out well behind in 4th place. With all his pit stops out of the way and a healthy lead, all Adrian Fernandez had to do now was keep his head down, not make any mistakes, pray for no caution flags, and he was well on his way to claiming his first ever kart series victory. But as you know how racing goes, it's not that easy, as Alex Zanardi began rapidly running down Adrian Fernandez in the closing stages, and then that dreaded full course caution would hit when Michael Andretti lost power and came to a stop at the end of Lakeshore Boulevard. The green flag would come back out on the racetrack with only 6 laps remaining, and Adrian Fernandez would do what he needed to do and got one hell of a restart and a nice jump on Alex Zanardi going into turn number 1. As Zanardi's probably the last guy you want chasing you down at the end of a race. Just ask Brian Herta. Fernandez began stretching it out with only 4 laps to go, but then tragedy would strike.
Whoa! Big time collision.
Oh, whose car is that? The back of that car up against the wall.
Ribeiro's in there. Johansson is in there. It's the other car that we really want to know about.
Wait a minute, who's
way
that?
Up the line, and we have a very serious accident. Very serious accident. And the course is blocked. I don't know how they're going to get cars.
Whoa, watch this, watch this. This car's really got to slow down. He didn't realize it was that block. They have got to stop this.
And that's Jeff Krosnoff over close to the wall, the one they're working over.
Kart officials would indeed end up stopping the race here, and with only 2 laps to go and the severity of this accident, which ended up claiming the lives of driver Jeff Krosnoff, as well as a track worker Gary Arvin, which Krosnoff's car struck, resulting in 2 fatalities. I'm not going to show the replay here, but it's pretty easy to find if you want to see it.
They worked with Jeff Krosnoff still in what's left of the car, and I have not seen that much damage to an Indy car in a very long time. And what this does is gives the race to Fernandez. Zanardi in 2nd place. It has been flagged 2 laps early at the 93rd lap. So Adrian Fernandez wins his first race in IndyCar on his first lead since Vancouver in '94. And so Adrian Fernandez, under a bit of a cloud, takes the win here, and they have stopped the cars well down the course while they make an attempt to service as best they can the situation involving Jeff Krosnoff.
Fernandez and his team would celebrate momentarily, not realizing the severity of what just took place. But it definitely ended up being such a huge rain cloud over what could have been an absolutely amazing day for Adrian Fernandez, claiming his first win. Unfortunately for Adrian Fernandez though, this wouldn't be the last time he would end up in this exact situation. But before we get to that, Fernandez would be involved in a tragedy that was more directly associated with him. A few years later, during the 1998 edition of the US 500 at Michigan International Speedway, Adrian Fernandez would be on pole for the race. This would end up being his first career pole. This race would also be the first race using Kart Series' new Hanford device, which I've explained a little bit in the past, but it was essentially on the rear wing and kind of acted like a parachute to slow down the cars drastically. As the previous year's Marlboro 500 at Fontana, cars were approaching 240 miles an hour in qualifying, which is absolutely insane. Fernandez's pole lap here was only 229 miles an hour, much slower than the previous track record of 234 miles an hour at Michigan. This acted almost like a parachute and punched a huge hole in the air, creating a lot of drag, which would create some of the best racing Indy cars ever seen, and led to a record 63 lead changes during this race, which absolutely annihilated the previous record. Although Fernandez had the pole, you've seen there that he dropped back right away, and he was only able to lead 9 laps throughout the entire race. Although he didn't lead many laps throughout the day, he was in contention to win throughout the race, as the Hanford device made it very difficult for drivers to pull away from the pack. But on lap 176, things would go wrong for Fernandez, and a terrible tragedy would strike.
Right there, Adrian Fernandez. There goes the pole money. Right there, that was our pole position. And a bit of debris went over the catch fence.
As you heard Bob Varsha say, indeed some debris did end up going over the catch fence. It was Adrian Fernandez's right front wheel. This would end up killing 3 spectators at the race: Michael Totkis, Cheryl Laster, and Kenneth Fox. 6 more people were also injured during this accident, but thankfully Adrian Fernandez was okay. Unlike the race in Toronto though, and still quite a few laps left, despite what was going on in the grandstands, the race would not stop and would go to its conclusion, which the Kart Series received some heavy criticism for. With the tragedy here in Michigan, and one that happened in the IRL at Charlotte the following season with a very similar situation to this, some good things didn't end up coming out of it, as wheel tethers were mandated to be installed on these cars to prevent wheels from flying off. Some changes to the catch fences at tracks, including Michigan here, were mandated as well, and the fences be made much taller. And it's a truly terrifying and unfortunate circumstance, as no one expects something like this to happen when you attend a race, but the risks are there. And thankfully nothing bad happened at the 2023 Indy 500 with a wheel catapulted off Kyle Kirkwood's car. As previously stated, the race would continue, go to its conclusion, and Greg Moore would end up taking the victory. As sad and tragic as this was, just 2 weeks later, Adrian Fernandez would claim victory at the Miller Lite 200 at Mid-Ohio, which I'm sure was a much needed jolt of positivity, as I can only imagine what he was truly feeling during the aftermath of that accident in Michigan. The following year at the 1999 Marlboro 500 at Fontana, which was the final race of the 1999 kart season, would once again see a dark cloud over Adrian Fernandez's success. It was a huge day for kart, as Juan Pablo Montoya and Dario Franchitti were in a scorcher of a championship battle headed into this final race. One sad thing about this is that Fernandez could have very much been in the championship fight here if it wasn't for an injury he sustained at Belle Isle, where he would end up missing 4 races but still finish 6th in the final standings. Fernandez would end up rolling off in the 13th spot to start this one. On my channel I do have a full in-depth video regarding this race, if you want to check it out when you're done watching this one. Unfortunately, it wouldn't take very long for tragedy to strike in this one, as on the 9th lap, Greg Moore would lose control of his car off turn number 2 and have one of the most horrific accidents ever seen in professional motorsports. Once again, I'm not going to show it in this video, but if you want to see it, it's pretty easy to find. This would end up claiming the life of Greg Moore, who was an exceptional young talent and a driver that many dearly miss to this day. The race would continue on here as information began trickling in about Greg's condition throughout the race, but the teams were pretty good at not letting the drivers know, and they would actually not find out until the conclusion of the race.
Greg has severe head and internal injuries. He's being sent to Loma Linda Hospital for further resuscitative efforts. Dr. Jeff Grange, who's the chief emergency doctor here in this area, is with him in the helicopter and is going to report back to me soon.
This is a life-threatening situation?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
As the race was approaching 10 laps to go, it was becoming apparent that this was going to be a fuel mileage race, and leader Juan Pablo Montoya as well as several others had to hit pit road. This would end up handing the lead to Adrian Fernandez, who was also super close on fuel, but his team calculations gave him just enough to make it to the start-finish line on the final lap, where he would then run out. So he was going to try to save all the fuel that he can and run this one to the end and steal the victory. And that is exactly what he would end up doing.
Off of the final corner, Adrian Fernandez takes the win. The gamble pays off, and it's number 5 in his career for Adrian Fernandez.
Juan Pablo Montoya would end up coming around to claim the Kart Series championship by virtue of a tiebreaker with Dario Franchitti. Celebrations for both Fernandez and Montoya would be completely overshadowed with the loss of Greg Moore.
Adrian Fernandez, of course, won this race. Got out of the car with the congratulations of the team. And then, like so many of the other drivers, he heard the news and just could not keep the tears in. Adrian Fernandez, along with some other drivers, are sequestered in the kart sanction office, getting away from the media, having some of their other fellow drivers come join them where they can spend some time in prayer. And as we've said, Greg Moore is one and was certainly one of the most popular drivers on the circuit. And it just has caught these drivers totally by surprise. And of course, Adrian Fernandez has declined to comment on the win today and just wants to be alone with his thoughts right now.
We would never get a winning interview for Adrian Fernandez from that race, but it's completely understandable why. After his IndyCar days, Adrian Fernandez would have great success in the American Le Mans Series, claiming a P2 championship, as well as attempting a couple of NASCAR Busch Series races for Hendrick Motorsports and Junior Motorsports, competing mostly at the race in Mexico they had back then, but he did make a few other starts, including some oval ones at Charlotte, Texas, Phoenix, and Homestead. Well, that's going to wrap up today's video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. This was kind of a darker video regarding tragedy and such, and it's just really unfortunate that it had to happen to a guy like Adrian Fernandez, one of the most iconic drivers in IndyCar Series history. But it's definitely an interesting fact, and one that I thought can be shared in a video. If you're in IndyCar history, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, it really helps me out, and I hope to see you in my next one. Take care, everybody.